I think something that I personally struggled with as an athlete growing up is you have this big event, you have this big game day, you know that's coming up, you know there's anxiety around it, you know there's nervousness, but it's like, what do I even need to do in order to be my best self on the court that day? Or like if I'm not my best self, whether it is a court, ice field that day, how do I handle that? So something that I wanted to lead with because I just went through it and can relate to it heavily is what does that preparation process look like for an athlete leading up to a major event? What should they be doing? All right, we're live. So I'm sorry if I'm collecting a little bit of peanut butter here in my mouth.
Okay.
For everybody that knows me, I'm a huge peanut butter guy, so pretty much is what my breakfast is every single morning, at least to start the day. So, something that I thought would be really cool to go through today, especially because last week we gave a lot of information, right? We touched on a lot of topics, really from a surface level, though. So this week, obviously, Tuesday and Wednesday, I played in APP NYC.
Yep.
And I think a lot of athletes are uncertain on what you need to do leading up to a big event like that. Like, what should that process look like in preparing for this major event, right? And I think something that I personally struggled with as an athlete growing up is you have this big event, you have this big game day, you know that's coming up, you know there's anxiety around it, you know there's nervousness, but it's like, what do I even need to do in order to be my best self on the court that day? Or like if I'm not my best self, whether it is a court, ice field that day, how do I handle that? So something that I wanted to lead with because I just went through it and can relate to it heavily is what does that preparation process look like for an athlete leading up to a major event? What should they be doing?
Yeah. There's mental, there's physical, but we'll focus on the mental, obviously.
Yeah, let's start there.
And the nature of competition versus practice is the fact that someone will win and someone will lose. Very rarely are there ties. So if we just, move. Oh, by the way, Al, on the bottom it says recording error. Are you seeing the same thing? Okay, there.
You're back?
Back on. I'll
I'm
say
not.
it again.
Great.
Yeah, it's back
You're
on. Okay. So when you go into competition as an athlete, you have to recognize the fact, unlike practice, someone is going to win and someone is going to lose. Very rarely are there ties. So knowing that, you are just as likely to win as you are to lose. I like to coach that it's 50-50, no matter who you're playing. One day you could win, the next day he or she could win. So you start at a neutral percentage of victory, and then you go from there. So the first thing is pre-accepting the fact that you can lose, and that is an outcome you need to deal with before the competition, not during the competition. Because what happens is if you haven't pre-accepting the fact that you can lose, your opponent can play lights out and you're left there saying, I'm hitting my best shots. They're not working. Your opponent could hit, like as pickleball or tennis, 10 let cords for winners, and you have 0. Every time you hit the lead, it comes on your side. The Colin Johns thing. And you have to pre-accept that.
This weekend.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, the wind, the sun, whatever, Yeah. On the better side, you unfortunately lose all of your points, not win them, So you got to get in with the pre-acceptance that you could lose and deal with the thoughts and emotions in advance of how you're going to feel. What are you going to be thinking? What are your loved ones going to be thinking? Your partner, your friends, your family, your coach, what are they going to be thinking about that loss? Deal with all of that in advance. That it got recorded and is on social media now everywhere with you making all of your blunders, And
Mm.
okay, so what? Then what? So what? Then what? You deal with it. You handle it. You sometimes you have to cry about it, if it's a big one, if it's the finals of something that's really important to you. Because if
Mm.
you don't do that uninterrupted, and I would say in isolation, I wouldn't do that in front of everyone because then you can't be fully yourself. And it's really tough. It's very tough to do this. But if you do that, then there is no more fear of your emotion. Most human beings are not afraid of losing, they're afraid of their emotional reaction to the loss. So when you deal with that in advance, you pre accept it, then you're no longer afraid of losing being the outcome. Then you table that. So I recommend doing that 3 to 1 day prior to the first game.
You're talking about
3 days
specifically.
to 1 day to 3 days.
You're talking about specifically outcomes you don't want to occur, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You don't, and the reason why you don't want a month out is because then you're going to forget that you accepted it. So you can't just, a month out, let me get it out of the way. No, no, no. There can't be more than one competition in between. No, has to be right before that competition. So, but I would say 2 or 3 days out is preferable, because then leading up to it, all the thoughts, feelings, imagery is playing well, doing well, overcoming challenges, overcoming the let cords, and then not just seeing yourself in the moment, but being in the moment. What are the smells? What's your energy? In tennis, some people say they love the smell of the fuzz. In pickleball, I think there's not much smell with the plastic ball, but and then what does it feel like to perform well and win? What does it feel like to
Mm.
not perform well and win? What does it feel like to be cheated and still win? And then you get to that moment where it's done, you won, you're congratulating your opponent at the net, and you're getting the gold medal, you're getting the check, you're holding the big trophy, all of that, and then only that. And if your mind starts to waver, you start to, the day before, have some negative thoughts of maybe I won't do this, maybe I don't believe, then you slide them aside, and then you refocus on winning, on the mentality and emotionality of winning. And if it keeps going to an area you don't want to go, you might have to quickly re-accept losing. It probably meant that you didn't fully accept it. And a real example is I had a mental skills coach, Larry, for our second tennis world record. And, one of the things he said is you got to go through the feeling of you failed miserably, and your loved ones still love you. Your family still loves you. Your partner still wants to be your partner. You accept those things in advance, and then it really works. Then you have less fear of an outcome that you don't want.
I mean, as we've talked about, right? I completely align with that. I think something that was super challenging for me was knowing that I left a high paying career, right? To not only pursue pickleball, but other things. And it's like, that's not necessarily what your parents want, right? they want you to be safe and secure. They want to know at the end of the day that you're going to be financially stable. You're going to have a good roof over your head. You're going to have a great life with a padded 401k. But I think the point that you made that took me a little bit to overcome was knowing that no matter what, that the individuals that I love and that are closest to me are going to still love me at the end of the day, regardless of the outcome, right? And maybe they have different visions of what they would like my future to be. But ultimately, when we talk about controlling the controllables, like that's something that you can control. So might as well pursue something that you love. But I think it was a super big challenge for me to have to keep going back to them, be like, lost another match today, lost another match today, lost another match today. Because you took this leap of faith and ultimately they were going against it. And now you have to keep going to them saying that they're right. Right. But maybe a framework that I've seen, right, and that I love and that I would like to emphasize is maybe they are right for 2 years. Maybe they are right for 3 years. But they're only thinking in a couple years when you're thinking in 5 years. You're thinking in a decade. And then after that time period, guess who's going to be right? It's going to be yourself. So I do think it took me a long time to have that framework to fully separate myself from the outcome, knowing that I'm going to wake up the next day no matter what. My loved ones are still going to love me. I'm still going to go about my day, and I'm still going to be practicing pickleball, and I'm still going to be going about my business because that's what I love allocating my time to. So I think separating yourself from that is huge because it was pivotal for me. So I really wanted to relate to that because I just think there's so much value in understanding how to separate yourself from there. So, but what I want to do is you said a lot, right? That's a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on there, and it can be overwhelming for many people, even like myself. It was super overwhelming in the beginning. It's like I got to do all this shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
before I step out there.
Totally.
So I want to summarize a little bit, and then I want you to chime in to just validate that the summary is accurate. So really what you're getting at is if I have an event that I'm leading up to, let's say it is in 2 weeks, because 2 weeks seems to about be like a good sweet spot. Like you said, a month out is a little bit too much.
Yep.
Let's say it is 2 weeks to 10 days, like anywhere between 14 to 10 days. Do I want to take 1 day, a couple days to digest those quote unquote negative outcomes or those outcomes I don't want to occur? And when that process does go through like that, and I'm thinking about all those things, like how much time do I physically need to allocate to them? Like, should I be spending 5 minutes a day, 30 minutes? Like, well, what's the exact framework on how I should be not only visualizing or imagining it, but how much time should I be spending doing it?
Okay. So I think it's personal preference.
Okay.
I wouldn't let the pre-accepting of negative outcomes be more than one session.
Okay.
So you leave yourself and you get it done right there and then. 2 weeks is fine. That is a little bit longer. I usually like 1 week longest, but if 2 weeks works for you, 2 weeks works for you. I wouldn't revisit it because when you become excited and emotional and it's a big moment, and I just can relate it to, you know, our longest tennis volley rally. That was 30,576 shots, $1 million on the line for charity. It was a lot of pressure. And I know people say, well, does pressure really exist? Well, if you think it exists for sure. So,
Yeah.
and then unfortunately, a friend of the family passed away, and we had an unexpected funeral the night before. So that, adjusted my mental and emotional prep the night before. That's the last thing I thought I'd have to be dealing with.
Yeah.
So, uh, you know, your mind and your emotions are very fragile the day before, 2 days before, 3 days before. I find that you're really impressionable. So you don't want to go to the failure because that is what you're going to remember.
Mm,
You want to kind of like when you hear a song over and over again, right? A good song, you always hear it. It just comes out, right?
yeah,
But when you
that's
get a
good.
bad song, a song you don't like, it's hard to chase it away. I can't stop thinking about that. I don't want to think about that, right? So that's why I say, it's got to be done in advance. It's got to be done in one session and then never again before
Okay.
that event. And then everything is signs. You look for signs that tell you that you deserve to win, that it's yours and you deserve it. And this is what it's going to feel like. And this is what it's going to look like. And so that's what I would say there. And that I had to do a lot of that before that record, because at least in sport, you can have a bad shot, be off your game, make a mistake, and rebound from it.
Mm,
Sometimes, you miss a serve on the first shot long, and then you never miss the serve long again, right? Well, when you're doing a rally and you're at close range and it's 30,576 and if you miss, you are done. If you have a mental lapse, you are done. And the time between shots is, much less than a second. There is no room for error. And it's a very rigorous thing. I would contend, because a lot of people say, well, it's cooperative. You're doing it to try to say break a record or set a record. And what I would contend just doing it is, no, it's like you playing doubles with a partner. You got to keep your partner up and you up, not just you, but
yeah.
your partner too. So, and you can't have a lapse. And so that's why you have to have so much overwhelming positivity that when your circulation is cutting off in your hand and you're cramping and there's unexpected distractions, you know, that's okay. You can handle it because you have this positive mental attitude, PMA, and it's so abundant that by the end, maybe there's only a little bit left, like your positive mental bank account,
Yeah.
your positive mental bank account was so big prior to that it didn't matter. It still withstood the whole competition or event.
So that's great because I was leading into something that I first thought, and I think a lot of people are thinking right now. And I'll get there. So really, you're leaving like a day or so to thinking about the negative outcomes, the outcomes that you don't want to occur, emotionally digesting them, etc. Right? One session. From there, you're stacking that positive bank account day after day leading up to the event. And I think majority of people can understand that, right? Something that I struggled with and that I came back to you with, and I think this relates to exactly what you're talking about right now, is on event day or right before event day, getting some of those negative thoughts creeping back in, right? Like, what do you then do with those thoughts? I understand you have a massive bank account, but really, what do you do with those thoughts to just either push them aside or get them away? Like, how should I digest those at the time being so close to event day?
Acceptance. So I'm gonna say something, and then you're gonna tell me if you can do it. So
Yeah.
so ready?
Yes.
Don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of a pink elephant. What are you thinking?
Of course, I immediately thought of a pink elephant.
There you go. So that is a negative thought that you are trying to force out of your mind. It is not possible. It's too late. It's there. And the harder that you try to avoid thinking of a pink elephant, the
Mm,
more difficult it is to ignore it. So what you want to do is twofold. Accept the fact that you just had a negative thought and let it pass through your mind like a gust of wind. The wind comes and then it goes. Or like the tide in an ocean, it comes and then it goes. And that is okay. Everything that happens game day is okay. My brother and I, we were going to that pro tournament in New Jersey, and we were on the road. And at 5 a.m., my car broke down. I ended up donating it to Cars for Kids, but we left it on the highway, and we got an Uber, and so we
oh,
got to the event, and we got to the event. We're normally going to get to the event like 3 hours early. We ended up getting to the event only an hour early. Yeah, it was very stressful because we didn't think we would get there. It was pitch dark on the side of the highway and everything. It was really dangerous. So I had to say, this is meant to be. It's okay.
mm,
And wouldn't it be an amazing story if we can pull out a win despite what just happened? And it's cool when that actually happens because you're like, "Whoa, it works." And so
yeah.
then the second thing I would say with the pink elephant analogy and accepting negative thoughts or distractions is the fact that you have to really understand the way the mind works and the way memory recall happens. So, what you're hoping to do when you do this imagery beforehand of the mental rehearsal script of what's going to happen in your event, what happens is when it's happening, you want that deja vu feeling of this just happened. I know what's going to happen. This just happened. And it happens. And when I said don't think of a pink elephant, okay? I'm going to take you through the second exercise. And that is I want you to put a thumbs up
Okay.
when a mental image, as soon as it pops in your head, and I know you're pretty quick, I want you to put a thumbs up as soon as it
Okay.
pops in your head.
I'm ready
Ready?
to rock. Yeah.
A yellow tiger. Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
A gray squirrel. Okay. Now these are images.
Mm-hmm.
Ready? Don't. Okay. What was the image?
Image was literally just a font, probably Times New Roman, of the word don't.
Okay. So why did that take longer for you to put your thumbs up? Your thumbs.
Do you want me to give the answer that we've talked about or why I truly think that beforehand? Um,
What
so
what what you thought about before and pretend we didn't talk about it.
yeah, so um, you didn't give me any imagery. You just gave me a word. And yes, if I said a word like, I don't know, simply toilet, you'd probably think of a toilet. And I only brought up toilet because I'm literally staring at tissue paper and straight in front of me, right? Um, I would probably think of it, but it's challenging for any time that you think of anything to even process the word don't. And I know the second piece of that is that your brain, right, physically can't process don'ts. So I think that's where when you told me don't, it's like, don't do what? Like what am I not doing? And that's really the second question. But then when we go to the imagery exercise, it's like, okay, now I gotta actively think of it. It's not just like it happens. It's like I have to actively think of, okay, what does don't look like?
Yeah.
That takes a couple extra seconds, and then you get your image. But it's not like a subconscious immediate thing. It's like I have to actively think of what don't is and what it even looks like.
Yeah. And what I would say there is, you know how some people that are really brilliant, they are mute or deaf, or there's something that they don't
Mm,
have, but then they're unbelievable at something else, a
yeah.
skill or whatever. So it's almost like someone who is illiterate and you say don't might see the image of a Ghostbuster symbol, the red image with the line
Okay.
through. For example, don't swim, there are sharks. Everyone
Mm,
knows what that means, whether you can read or not. So the best answer I've gotten from some of the athletes that I've coached is a Ghostbuster symbol. That is actually a visual. The font and is okay, but that's more forcing it. You know, it didn't just
yeah.
come.
I
And then you would have
certainly
to
can see that.
remember what font you use. But it is, if it's a drastically different font, you might be able to remember that. But what I'm getting at is the way the brain thinks and remembers, the way the mind thinks and remembers is through images,
Mm,
not letters or words. So it's an image which goes across all cultures and all languages. There's no processing there. The image just pops in. So that is why, if you see in my coaching, I don't use the word don't.
mm,
I For two reasons, or actually I would probably add a third one. Number one, it's negative. Number two, people don't like to be told what to do. They want to do what they want to do, kind of like what you said about being a professional pickleball player, despite what your parents might want or think. And the
yeah.
third is the mind doesn't remember and process things that way. That is why when you're doing your mental rehearsal script, notice I say first person, not third person. You put yourself in the moment and you experience it. So that's where when players after a miss say no or don't do that, they're going to do that. Don't hit in the
Yeah.
net. You have left with an image of the net and a ball hitting the net. That is the last image your mind has. That's most likely what's going to happen. You've created the crease to you hitting the net again. And so you want to say miss high, aim higher, push longer, keep my body still, keep my head still, whatever it would be. But it's got to be something that you want to happen. And it's got to be an image of you doing it and that happening, not just words.
So now and I'm going to come back to a few questions, but I love that you brought this up. So now in that scenario we just talked about, when something happens that you don't want to occur, how you communicate to yourself. So something that I used that we changed was no, right? When I had a shot and I was like, "No, Alec, like why would I take that shot?" We really changed that pattern. But you gave me the second piece of that, is like, how should I communicate to myself when I do have a good shot? Right? When I hit the perfect winner. When it is a 3 on the paddle, my balance is a
Yeah.
3, and everything I just saw right before I hit it occurs. After that, what should I be doing?
Yeah. With a see it and repeat it.
Yeah.
So you're done with the point. You hit a great shot in the corner. Let's say a serve really deep. They
Yep.
had trouble returning. Then you, in your mind, you see that again when you're going back to the baseline to serve again. You see that and you repeat that again. It's another rehearsal. So now
Mm.
the likelihood that you do it again increases. Why wait for another point to actually happen to give yourself an advantage?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because when you're talking about the rehearsals, that was a big shift for me out there, was not only coaching myself through misses, but also coaching myself and having that positive dialogue with myself on winners, on good shots, on shots that I hit correctly, to give myself that extra mental rep, which really just gives myself the extra edge out there.
Yeah.
Um, Backtracking slightly, because you were saying some really good stuff, didn't want to cut you off, but we're
Yep.
talking about the preparation process. We talked about, I originally brought up 2 weeks for myself. Let's say it is 10 days. Let's say it's 5.
Yep.
Really, what I think a lot of people would want to know, including myself, and we talked about this, is, let's say I do get the phone call. someone pulled out of APP Chicago last minute. I got to hop on a plane to fly down there if I want the spot to play. I have no preparation, none at all. So for me, it's like, okay, I don't have the 10 days. I don't have the 2 weeks. I had no idea whether I was going to play in this event. How do I go about it? Right? How do I navigate not having any preparation at all?
So that's having such a strong purpose that there are no options but you saying yes, going down there and playing your game. If you're not secure in your purpose, then it's going to be a debate. But
Okay.
if you are secure in your purpose, then you treat preparation as a luxury, not a necessity. And you have to be pre-ready all the time. You have to just be pre-ready. Like if I were to tell you right now,
what does that look like?
yeah,
What is
like
pre-ready
if
all
I
the
were to
time?
tell you right now, Al, I'll tell you right
Yeah.
now, shoot, you put your calendar wrong. You're playing today in NYC. Matter of fact, you're playing in 3 hours. Go, right? You're going to get yourself ready. You're going to get in the car, and then you're doing the imagery the entire way of success, succeeding. This is what you expected. It's okay despite that. Wouldn't it make a great news story that someone who had no preparation won the darn thing? Amazing. And that's what my brother and I did. We were playing the first year that we became number one in New England in men's open doubles. We were down. It was, let's see, we were down. We won the first set 6-4, and then my brother was serving at love 40, and it was, I believe it was 5-4 us, something like that. It might have been a bigger deficit. And so I went back to the baseline and we said to each other, wouldn't it make a great story if you come back love 40 down and win the game and we win this match? And that's exactly what happened. So what you got to do is you got to spin it on its head, because think about it. If you never had an amazing comeback and you don't believe you could, you never will.
True.
If you never weren't prepared for an event and don't know what it's like to then win it, you never will. So you'll let the unpreparedness determine the outcome. So I have a quick real story. So I studied to become a Dale Carnegie coach. It was a wonderful experience. And one of the sessions was, all of the people like me are in the audience, and our instructors, our coaches said, we're going to have you go in front of the room, and then we're going to say a topic, and immediately, without hesitation, you got to speak with conviction for 1 minute on that topic. That was my favorite one. And they give Dale Carnegie pens, these really cool green calligraphy type pens that are beautiful. And, that was the one that I won the most, and I loved it. It was a lot of great, brilliant minds in that room. But if you could speak confidently about something you had no idea was coming up, without saying without stuttering, without pausing, right through, as if you are reading it, yet making good eye contact with the audience, that is the thing. So that is that pre-readiness. You are already ready. It's not that you are not ready. You are already ready. You have to believe that you are already ready. And then you have to pre-accept that if you weren't perfect, you weren't in flow state, that is completely okay. And so that's a real story of me doing that in an environment where that was what's coached. That is what I learned. That is what I did.
I absolutely love that. And I think that you probably going in was like, you know what? I'm going to give this my best shot. right? I don't know anything about the topic. I might as well just have fun with it. And let me see what I can do, right? You're challenging yourself in a way of like, hey, let me see what I could do with this. Almost per so something that there's this entrepreneur, her name is Layla Hermosi, and pretty known in the space, but something that she's brought up is like seeking out conditions that aren't ideal so that when conditions are ideal, you are overly prepared for them.
Yep.
So I feel like in that same retrospect, if you have consistently practiced in conditions that aren't ideal, one, you're ready for the not ideal conditions. And then two, if conditions are ideal, you have that much of a leg over the rest of the competition. And the reason that I brought that up was because Jared and I didn't tell you this yet. And to emphasize again, Jared is my doubles partner.
Mhm.
When we were going to the singles qualifier the other morning, we get an alert. So singles started at 8 a.m. Jared and I are like, you know what? We wanted to prioritize a little bit of sleep.
Mm.
We said we'll get up around 5:45, 6. We'll get there between 6:45 and 7. I'll be okay. We're like, fine. So at about 6:30 in the morning, we're leaving out the door. It's only roughly 16 minutes to get there from where our Airbnb was. There's a little bit of traffic. However, not that much. Maybe it was going to take us like 22 minutes. We get a text saying that our bracket is starting at 6:45 a.m. Rolling out of bed in the car, we're literally leaving, and we get a text. We're like, "You got to be kidding me right now! Like, what is going on?" It's supposed to start at 8 a.m. bracket. So either way, we're not going to talk about how we got there quickly. However,
You don't
we
want to
get
incriminate yourselves.
exactly. However, we probably got there, I would say, a little after like 7:15, thinking that we were going to miss our first match. Because
Mm.
on the drive there, we also got our court assignment. So we're like, we're screwed. We're like, we're absolutely screwed. There's no way we're gonna get there. So we get there, and anyways, long story short, the bracket still wasn't starting until 8 a.m. They sent those out prematurely, accidentally with the system. Backtracking a second, on the way there, all Jay and I discussed was we prepared for this situation to occur.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
prepared for a condition that could not be prepared for to happen. So in the car, we're like, we're going to go. We're probably going to have no warm up. We're going to step right on the court. We're going to give it our best effort and have fun doing it because this is why we practice every single day. Right. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're challenging ourselves in a new environment.
Yeah.
So what I want to get at is although we did have time inevitably, I think that played so much in our favor because Jay and I in the car prepared for a highly unideal condition.
Yeah.
So now that the conditions when we arrived became more ideal, we were that much prepared going into singles.
Yeah.
And honestly, Jay and I, although lost in the qualifier, played pretty well compared to some of the other tournaments that we played in.
Yeah.
Very freely, right? And I believe that is because, one, you set the expectation pretty low after you're like, well, I got no preparation, right?
Yeah. No expectation, no frustration.
Right? But then two, the conditions became more ideal than we anticipated. So in going in, we're like, oh my, we got another 45 minutes to warm up. Great. So not only were our expectations originally low, but then we had an ideal condition when we prepared for an unideal condition and played pretty damn well because of that.
Yeah.
So,
And that same thing happened to my brother Et and I at that Atlantic City Regionals in New Haven. We were supposed to play at 1 p.m. And then we get a text that they had to combine divisions and our start time now is 8 a.m. And this was at 7 a.m. and it's a half-hour drive. So rather than panic, there's no time to panic. We get our butts in the car, get down there, check in, even had time to warm up, and we ended up being undefeated and winning gold. And it's one of those things where if you are pre-ready and you've pre-accepted any distraction, any challenge, you just take it as, wouldn't it be a great story if our event started 4 or 5 hours earlier, 5 hours earlier than we had planned, and we only had a few minutes to get there. Thank the Lord, we were even looking at our texts 5
Yeah.
hours in advance, so, but things happen for a reason. But if you go in there already ready, then that happened to be part of the process. That's why what I suggest athletes do, and you and I haven't really talked about this in detail yet,
What?
but
You're holding something back from me, Ange?
no, I got
Come
to give it
on
to you in
now.
bits. I got to give it to you in bits and pieces, because otherwise it could be overwhelming. Because I know how much mentally and emotionally draining it is to mental prep for events.
It's
Because
true.
that's why people don't do it, because
Mm,
it is hard. It takes a
yeah.
lot of time, and you have to create your own discipline and structure. So,
Yeah.
anyways, there's the mental rehearsal script that everything goes as planned. There's the mental rehearsal script that nothing goes as planned. And there's mental rehearsal script that is right in the middle.
Mm,
Then there's a mental rehearsal script that you're playing someone much better than you. A mental rehearsal script that you're much better than your opponent. And a mental rehearsal script that your opponent is exactly the same level as you are. Now, there's more, but those are 6. So you have them, and then this is where some information about the tournament is good, because if it's a surface you've never played on, an opponent you don't know, an
mm.
opponent that you happen to know is much better than you, an opponent that you've beaten 5 times before undefeated, the mental rehearsal for those is going to be slightly different based on the risk level you need to win. So I'm not a fan of looking ahead in the draw at all, but being aware of the first person or people you are playing, I would say, is okay if you're going to use that information to be mentally stronger. But if
Mm.
you are not, and it's just for curiosity, then I wouldn't do it.
I fully get that. Um, I really do. And there's a concept that you have given me, and it is also in your book, that I'm piecing together as we're talking about it. Um, and if you feel like it doesn't relate at all, you can be blunt with me and be like, that doesn't relate at all. But I feel like personally, this is where we talk about the relationship between like static and dynamic confidence,
Yeah.
because we talk about static being the confidence that you wake up with every single morning, right?
Yeah.
And then dynamic is kind of more dynamic. It flows. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's associated to outcomes like winning when you get that little burst. Or it's down when you lose a match that you really thought that you could win. Um, for me, I felt that all the preparation has allowed my static confidence, the confidence I wake up with every morning, to slowly increase, meaning giving a little bit more evidence to that stack every single morning when I wake up. So therefore, when something like this, a uncontrollable occurs that you didn't prepare for, does happen, you're able to say, I'm ready for this, regardless. Because I've built just a pile of evidence in my static confidence bank account, if we're using the bank account analogy, to say that I'm ready. I think where it becomes very fragile is when you haven't built that stack of evidence over time. And your static confidence is necessarily that you wake up with every morning is not where you would like it to be. And I think you're always building that stack, right? Consistently. But I think by consistently building that over and over and over, that's where you're able to handle more and more and more uncontrollables, right?
Yeah.
So that's the relationship that popped into my brain when we're talking about being prepared for any situation, right? Being pre-prepared, being prepared for things that you can't necessarily always prepare for. Do you
So I would
want
say
to?
it's
Yeah,
not dead on. It's not dead on, but
close.
it's close enough not to edit it out. Uh, so so I would say there is a correlation between confidence and preparedness,
Yeah,
but it's just here's the difference.
yeah, give it to
So
me.
uh, how confident, Al, are are you
Yeah,
that tomorrow morning the sun will rise? What percent?
100%
Why?
because it rises every single day.
It
It's
has
the way.
risen every single day since you have ever remembered, right?
Yes,
No
yes,
matter what the weather patterns, no matter what the solar patterns are, it has done that every single day. So
yes.
that is the equivalent of static confidence. Why? Because action reaction. You wake up, you saw the sun. In pickleball or any sport, but let's take pickleball.
Yeah.
When you serve a certain way with a certain motion, a certain spin, certain, speed, height, spin, direction, those four controllables with your serve, and you've done that in practice every day, that you can anticipate that outcome, so long as those variables are exactly the same, you
Mm,
will get the same outcome. So that is static confidence, that no matter what happens, you're late to the tournament because they messed up the draw, whatever, as long as you do the same exact thing, you will get the same result. But if you don't have that preparation, then it's hit or miss. And that's like the tide analogy again,
mm.
dynamic versus static. Dynamic confidence is the tide comes in, you're really confident. Then it goes back out, you're not so confident. Then it comes back in, and it's kind of like your boat, and your boat's kind of going up and down based
Yeah.
on that. So, so yes, I would say there is a correlation between that. The pre-acceptance is not just anchored on confidence. It's more of a state of being, like breathing. You're breathing. You're not even thinking about it. It's just happening. That pre-preparation, pre-acceptance, that's what true champions understand, that a lot of the hard mental work has already been done. And I'll just share one quick story, and then I know we'll wrap it up. But
Yeah.
I was coaching junior tennis teams for years, and we won a lot of state titles. And we were the underdogs in this particular one. There were three teams, and we were team number three. And this is where three is not necessarily desirable. You want to be number one, and we were number three. So
Yeah.
basically, on paper, there's no way that we should win this. It was, I believe, a 10 and under or 12 and under. I think it was 12 and under state championship. So we were watching the other uh, players warming up with their coaches, and they had full uniforms and all looked like synchronous swimmers doing their warm up, all on one court. It was insane, and we were like the bad news bears. People coming in different times. Everyone had different clothing on, and so I brought them outside of the club, and I got them in a circle around me, including all the parents, because the parents, especially to young athletes, their support is
Mm,
critical. And I read a press release that I had wrote in advance with detail, basically like a version of the mental rehearsal script. And
mm.
I really got teary eyed and choked up. I almost couldn't get through it, but I I read it with such conviction and emotion that in looking at the athlete's eyes, I knew they were going to win. My work was done. I just then enjoyed being the coach that didn't need to coach for us to win. And sure enough, we won. And that's just a specific example from my past of how when you prepare mentally and emotionally for something like that, then you're ready before it starts. It doesn't matter what happens after that.
Yeah.
Being coached against or not, like the young guy that you played, the dad was coaching him. Maybe it's illegal. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Ange, for another fun episode of the Fail First podcast with Rossetti Brothers. And on to the next one. Thank you,
Sounds
Ange.
great.
I'll see you.